Now, a couple of episodes ago, I released my top 10 offenses going into the upcoming 2022 NFL season. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. And now I'm here with my top 10 defenses going into the 2022 NFL season. And before I start, after you guys get done watching this, let me know what teams you think are too high, who's too low, who got left off the list that should be on here, and explain why. Because too many times I would read the comments and I would just see a lot of people calling me an idiot for having their team ranked too low or being left off the list, and they wouldn't tell me why. Give me an explanation for why said team should be higher or for why said team should be on the list. Calling me an idiot doesn't give me any insight for why you feel your team should be higher. So let's start off at number 10 with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals defense was underrated last season. This was probably the most underrated defensive unit in the NFL last year. It was a large reason why they had the Cinderella run that they had in the postseason, beating the Las Vegas Raiders in the wild card round, upsetting the Tennessee Titans on the road, and beating the Kansas City Chiefs for the second time that season in the AFC Championship game. And if you go back and you watch that AFC Championship game, the Bengals defensive coordinator made some phenomenal second half adjustments, and they shut down Kansas City's offense. I believe Patrick Mahomes only had 55 total passing yards and 2 interceptions in the second half of that game. So the Bengals defensive coordinator deserves a lot of credit and a lot of praise. And I think it's only a matter of time before he ends up getting a head coaching job, because he has done a phenomenal job with this defense. You have Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, which Trey Hendrickson is coming off back-to-back consecutive double-digit sack seasons. He's probably one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, at least top 5 or top 7. You have DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Logan Wilson, and Jermaine Pratt really came on during the postseason. And I think that if they can continue that level of play that they had in the playoffs and they bring that into the regular season, I think that this defense is going to potentially be top 5. But the reason why I have them at number 10 is because, yes, I do like Chidobe Awuzie. Eli Apple isn't that great. He was okay last season. He wasn't as bad as what a lot of people make him out to be. But I would have loved to see the Cincinnati Bengals upgrade from Eli Apple. Now, you do have Mike Hilton at slot. He's probably one of the best slot cornerbacks in the NFL, maybe the best, depending on who you ask. And you do have rookie corner who they drafted out of Nebraska and Cam Taylor-Britt. But their cornerback positioning is the reason why I have them at number 10. Would have loved for them to improve from Eli Apple. Even though he was okay last year, I felt they could have upgraded. And if they would have done that, they would have been a lot higher on this list. At safety, you have Von Bell, pretty solid, and Jesse Bates, who happens to be one of the best safeties in the league and due for a new contract. San Francisco comes in at number 9. DeMeco Ryans is pretty underrated as a defensive coordinator. He did a really good job with a defense that had not a lot of talent at cornerback. They had some injuries as well. The defense still played really good. You have Nick Bosa, Arik Armstead. That's a really good tandem when it comes to the pass rush. You have Javon Kinlaw, who I think could end up breaking out this year. He's kind of been held back with injuries and not so great play. But I think if he can get back to 100% and he can improve, I think that he could end up having a big year in 2022 for the Niners. At linebacker, you are really deep and really loaded at this position. You got Drake Kinlaw, Fred Warner, Aziz Al-Sher, who comes from my current university, FAU, so I have to support my FAU alumni. And that cornerback, I mean, this is probably the deepest and most talented that the 49ers have been at this position since they last appeared in the Super Bowl. You have Emmanuel Mosley, Travaris Ward, who you signed in free agency. He was really good for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was pretty much their best cornerback. DeQuest Denard, interested in seeing what he does in the slot if he gets a start there. But you also have Jason Verrett. And Jason Verrett has been really good for the 49ers when he's been on the field. However, he hasn't really had the best of luck when it comes to being able to stay healthy. So hopefully if he can stay healthy, he can have a contribution in this secondary as well. You have Ambry Thomas, who had some experience last year. So hopefully going into 2022, he is a little bit better than what he was in 2021. And you still have Jimmy Ward at safety. Indianapolis Colts come in at number 8 on my top 10 defensive rankings for this season. Their defensive line is really good. You have Kwity Paye, who had 4 sacks as a rookie in 2021. Grover Stewart, who's really good against the run. You have DeForest Buckner, who's coming off his 3rd Pro Bowl appearance in his NFL career. Yannick Ngakoue was recently traded from Las Vegas, to Indianapolis, and he had 10 sacks. And I was a little surprised that the Las Vegas Raiders decided to trade him away, and they ended up signing Chandler Jones. You know, Chandler Jones is really good. He is an upgrade from Yannick Ngakoue. But, I mean, Yannick Ngakoue is probably one of the more underrated pass rushers in the league. He is a guy who you can consistently count on to give you 8 or more sacks year in and year out as long as he stays healthy. Then you have Isaiah Rodgers at cornerback, which last year in his 2nd season, he had 3 interceptions and 7 pass breakups. And he was a big surprise for Indianapolis. I wasn't expecting him to be that good. Then you signed Stephon Gilmore in free agency. He was really good with the Carolina Panthers and the few games that he appeared in for them. And with him coming into a already pretty good cornerback position, you're going to have Kenny Moore playing that nickelback / slot role for the Colts. So this is a really good secondary. Linebacker outside of Darius Leonard, I'm not really sold on Bobby Okereke. I think they probably could upgrade from him. And if they would have done that, they would have been a little bit higher. Also, the safety position, not really all that keen on. You have Rodney McLeod, who is 30 years old. Julian Blackmon, he's solid. So this is a Colts team that has a really good defensive line, coupled with the fact that you have Darius Leonard, who is one of the best players at his position in the NFL, a solid secondary. Would have loved for them to upgrade at safety and probably find another good linebacker to pair up other than Bobby Okereke with Darius Leonard. But overall, despite the fact that they lost defensive coordinator Matt Iberflus, they're going to be replacing him with Gus Bradley, who did a pretty good job with the Las Vegas Raiders defense. So this defense comes in at number 8 for me. At number 7, we have the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. You have Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Greg Newsome as your 3 starting cornerbacks. Then at safety, Grant Delpit, John Johnson. This is one of the most talented defensive back groups in the whole entire NFL. They have a lot of depth, a lot of talent. If one of their starting safeties goes down for injury, you have Ronnie Harrison who can step in and play. At linebacker, outside of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, not really all that thrilled with what they have there, which is kind of the reason why they weren't a little bit higher. I really was close to putting them inside of the top 5, but linebacker really kind of brought them down a little bit. But I do like JOK. You got Myles Garrett, probably the 2nd or 3rd best defensive player in the NFL, depending on who you ask. He's going to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year this year. Maybe he's finally able to win the award. You have Jadeveon Clowney coming off a bounce-back season. So this Browns defense is really good. They have a lot of talent. And if linebacker was just a tad bit better behind JOK, they probably would have finished inside of my top 5, maybe on my top 3, because this secondary is loaded and incredibly talented. The Pittsburgh Steelers come in at number 6. You can always count on the Steelers to have a really good defense. Even though last year it took a little bit of a step back because they had one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. That was due to not so great linebacker play. Also, the fact that you dealt with a good amount of injuries on the defensive line, such as Stephon Tuitt, he didn't play last season. He's now retired. Tosin Alualu also missed time due to injuries as well. Now with the fact that you have Alualu back, that's going to help the run game improve. You also signed Larry Ogunjobi in free agency. A couple of weeks ago, he had a career year with the Cincinnati Bengals. He recorded 7 sacks. He's also pretty good against the run. Chris Wormley was a very big surprise last season because when the Steelers first traded for him in the trade with the Baltimore Ravens, I was like, I don't really see the point, because anytime a team is willing to just give you a player off their roster inside your division and your arch rival, he can't be good. But he actually was. And he had 7 sacks last year. So he's going to factor into this pass rush rotation. We already know about Cam Hayward, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. TJ Watt, the reigning defensive player of the year. Alex Highsmith was incredibly underrated last year. Really underrated. He was really good when it came to getting pressure on the quarterback, and he probably could have had double-digit sacks as well, but there was so many great pass rushers on this defense that anytime he would get to the quarterback, sometimes he would end up creating the opportunity for somebody else to get credited with the sack. But Alex Highsmith had a really impressive 2021 campaign. Linebackers where this defense needs to improve at. Now, they brought in Myles Jack. They signed him to a 2-year deal. And you also have Devin Bush. Devin Bush last season was coming back from that ACL injury that he suffered in the year prior, and he looked like a shell of himself. And along with Myles Jack before 2021 was one of the best linebackers in the NFL. And then Urban Meyer came along and just ruined him like he did the whole entire Jacksonville Jaguars team last year. So with Myles Jack and Devin Bush, you have 2 linebackers who are looking to bounce back. And I think that they will, due to the fact that the Steelers brought in Brian Flores to be on their coaching staff. He's going to be coaching up the linebackers. And a lot of people have raved about what Brian Flores has done so far with the Steelers defense, especially when it comes to the linebackers in particular. He was a large reason why Myles Jack decided to come to Pittsburgh. So I think that Brian Flores being the linebackers coach and working with these linebackers individually is going to pay off this season. And that's why I have the Steelers so high. Now, I understand that a lot of people aren't going to be all that thrilled about the cornerback position, but Levi Wallace was the Buffalo Bills' best cornerback last season. When Tre'Davious White went down with his injury, it was pretty much the best season of his pro career up to that point. So he's coming into Pittsburgh. He's going to be probably the second best cornerback on this team behind Ahkello Witherspoon. And Ahkello Witherspoon was a huge surprise because I don't think nobody expected him to be that good. You know, this is somebody up to this point that has had a pretty okay NFL career, but he went to Pittsburgh and he really flipped the switch. You also have Cam Sutton, Arthur Millette, who had a couple of key interceptions for the Steelers down the stretch last season. So although this isn't a cornerback group that's going to blow many people away, this is a cornerback group that did have a good amount of success last season. They were able to come away with turnovers as well, and I expect that to continue this season and 2022. At safety, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who recently got paid one of the best safeties in the game. Terrell Edmunds is the most underrated player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He gets a lot of flack from fans. Anytime there's a big play, everybody's quick to blame Terrell Edmunds, but a lot of people have to realize that Terrell Edmunds does his job for what the Steelers ask him to do. They're asking him to be a enforcer in the run game, come down the box, help out, bracket against tight ends, and help out in run support, and he does that pretty well. And Terrell Edmunds has gotten better every single season that he's been in Pittsburgh. Now, he may not have played up to the level that you would have hoped when you draft the safety in the first round. When you draft the safety in the first round, you're expecting Derwin James. But he's been pretty solid up to this point. I think that maybe since he has continued to improve so much over the last couple of years, that he maybe ends up improving and becoming a Pro Bowler this season. But the Steelers come in at number 6. Some people are probably going to say that the Steelers deserve to be a little bit lower, but the fact that this defense has always been so good year in and year out at getting consistent pressure on the quarterback, I have to put them at number 6 because it's a passing league. The name of the game is being able to slow down opposing teams' quarterbacks, and the Steelers do a really good job at that, creating havoc behind the line of scrimmage and getting the quarterback down for a lot of sacks. At number 5, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. It was really tough to start ranking these teams, but the Buccaneers have to be at number 5. Some people may believe that they are a little bit too high considering how the defense played last year, but you got to remember that the Buccaneers were really banged up at one point. They were guys coming off the street who had to play cornerback. You had old man Richard Sherman back there at corner. That didn't really work out all that well. So there were a good amount of injuries that the Buccaneers faced on defense last year, which was a reason for the slight drop-off that they had. But this was still a defense that was pretty good at times. They're still going to be really good up front. You got William Golston, Vita Vea, Akeem Hicks. You also have Joe Teron, who we are expecting to get a big amount of snaps this season. And I think that he's going to be really good. And he was a first-round pick for the Buccaneers. Then you got to remember, Shaq Barrett's still here. He had 10 sacks last season. So with Shaq Barrett there getting a lot of attention on the edge, that probably should open up room for Joe Teron, who was a first-round pick coming out of Washington in the previous draft. Then you still have one of the best linebacking cores in the NFL with Devin White. Although he isn't that great in pass coverage, hopefully he continues to improve that aspect of his game. Outside of pass coverage, he does everything that you need him to do from the linebacker position. He has great speed. He's a great sideline-to-sideline linebacker, really good at stopping the run. And then he's a really good blitzer. Rather you want to blitz him off the edge or blitz him up the gap, he can do it all other than cover. Then you have Levante David, who is one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. Carlton Davis, Jamal Dean are back again at cornerback. Both these two cornerbacks are pretty underrated in my opinion. You look at the safety position with Antoine Winfield, Mike Edwards. You did lose Jordan Whitehead, but either Mike Edwards, Logan Ryan, or Keanu O'Neal could end up stepping into that position if he doesn't perform. So this Buccaneers defense, they have always been really good at stopping the run. And if they're able to stay fully healthy this season, this pass defense also should be really good as well. And I think Joe Teron is going to be a name that a lot of people aren't going to know, but you're going to know it by the end of this upcoming season because I think he's going to be an absolute stud for the Bucs this season. Overall, if you're talking about some of the most talented defenses in the NFL from a pure talent standpoint, the Buccaneers have to be in your top 5. At number 4, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, a lot of people are probably going to feel that the Green Bay Packers should be in the top 3, which I will understand, but the teams that I had above them were just a little bit more talented, in my opinion, but their defensive line is going to be really good. You got Devontae Wyatt. He's going to be a stud. Kenny Clark, Jarrett Reed, Dean Lowry had a pretty nice year in 2021. You got rookie Quay Walker. You got Devondre Campbell. And Rashawn Gary is really starting to come into his own. He had 9 sacks last season. This is somebody who potentially could end up going over double digits this season. Maybe he ends up getting to 12 or 13. Preston Smith also was really good. So the front 7 should be really good. This is probably one of the better front 7s in the NFL. Eric Stokes was one of the best rookie cornerbacks in the NFL last season. Then you pair him up with Jair Alexander, who is one of the best cornerbacks in the league. This is a really good cornerback group. Then you have Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, one of the best safety duos in the NFL. The Green Bay Packers, from a talent standpoint, this is one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. And probably the most talented defense maybe in the NFC. But as I said, the teams that I have above them, I just felt were slightly more talented, but they come in at number 4 for me. At number 3, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Now listen, I understand that the Baltimore Ravens defense wasn't all that great last year. They were really good against the run, but when it came to their pass defense, they weren't good. They recently got rid of Wink Martindale, who is now with the New York Giants, but you replace him with former Michigan defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald. Now, Macdonald was Michigan's defensive coordinator during last season for the Wolverines. He was a large reason why David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson had so much success, along with Daxton Hill. And Michigan had one of the best defenses in college football on their run to the college football playoffs. Now he's back with the Baltimore Ravens, and this defense is really talented. Now, you got to remember, last year they had a lot of injury. Marcus Peters was out for the year. Marlon Humphrey had some games that he missed. He was also pretty banged up as well. So with everybody coming back fully healthy, I expect this pass defense to improve tremendously. And also, you signed Kyle Fuller. Now, I understand that Kyle Fuller isn't the Kyle Fuller that we remember in the past when he was at his best with the Chicago Bears. However, with him playing in the slot, I definitely feel it's going to be an upgrade there for Baltimore. It's not as if you're asking him to guard the best wide receivers anymore. You're basically asking him to guard slot guys who typically tend to be a little bit more smaller and agile. And I think that Kyle Fuller would be a good fit in the slot for the Baltimore Ravens, along with Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. Then you have Marcus Williams, who you stole in free agency for a really good deal. And you also stole Kyle Hamilton, 14th overall in this past year's NFL draft, rookie out of Notre Dame. In my opinion, Kyle Hamilton was the most talented player coming out of this past year's NFL draft. You can play him inside the box. You can play one high with him, two high. He can guard tight ends one-on-one and man coverage. He can guard running backs coming out of the backfield. You can blitz him off the edge. He's long. He's rangy. When you put him inside the box in certain packages, nickel and dime, he pretty much is another linebacker. I mean, if you watch some of his highlights and you see him inside the box, he does a lot of work, like a lot of work. It's just really impressive watching Kyle Hamilton play inside of the box near the line of scrimmage. And with how talented this secondary is, it's a large reason why I have them at number 3. I think that this is the most talented secondary in the NFL when it comes to their starters, with Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Marcus Williams, and Kyle Hamilton. Now, linebacker, you have Patrick Queen, who is pretty good. He still is improving when it comes to his pass coverage. You got Josh Bynes, who also is really good there. So, to me, I think that this is the third most talented defense in the NFL, and I project this defense to be really good this upcoming NFL season. At number 2, we have the Buffalo Bills. I've seen a lot of people have the Buffalo Bills ranked a lot lower on their top 10. But when you look at this team from a talent standpoint, I mean, you have arguably the best safety tandem in the NFL. Michael Hyde, Jordan Poyer. You got your Davis White coming back. You have Kaiir Elam, who you drafted in the first round of this past year's draft out of Florida. He was one of the best cornerbacks coming out. And pretty much he could end up being your number 1 if you needed him to be. So you pretty much have 2 number 1 cornerbacks in White and Elam. You have Teron Johnson, who has now started to emerge as one of the 5 best slot cornerbacks in the league. Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds are a really good linebacker duo. A lot of people view Tremaine Edmonds as a bust. He's not a bust. He may not be as good as what you expect him to be since he was drafted in the first round, but he does his job for what the Buffalo Bills need him to do on this defense. Now, I'm really excited about this defensive line. Ed Oliver has started to become a monster for the Buffalo Bills over the last 2 seasons. Then you have Von Miller, who you signed in free agency. Don't let the age fool you. Von Miller is still one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, as we saw in the Super Bowl. And then you have Gregory Rousseau, who had a surprisingly good rookie season. And I think that Gregory Rousseau could end up being a 9, maybe 10 sack guy this year for the Buffalo Bills. You also have AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham. So you have a lot of depth and a lot of talent on the defensive line. The Buffalo Bills had the number 1 defense in the NFL last season statistically under defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier for a reason. It's not just because of their scheme, but it's also because they have a lot of talent and have a lot of depth at almost every single position on this defense. At number 1, I have the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, man, they have not only a lot of talent, but they have a lot of depth at pretty much every single position. Safety, linebacker, defensive line, corner. I mean, when you look at their secondary, this is the most talented secondary in the NFL. And I know I said this about the Baltimore Ravens, but I said that about the Baltimore Ravens when it comes to their starters. When you're looking at the New Orleans Saints, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cornerbacks on their rosters who could be starters as either a number 1 or a number 2 on other teams. Paulson Adebo had a pretty solid rookie season. Now, he had some ups and downs on the way, but last year, in his first season, coming out of Stanford, I thought he was pretty good. You have Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore has been one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL ever since he was drafted. CJ Gardner-Johnson, a.k.a. Mr. Deuce Deuce himself, is one of the best slot cornerbacks in the NFL. You also have Bradley Roby, who should be a starter somewhere else. If the New Orleans Saints wanted to trade him, they could get pretty good compensation in return. You got P.J. Williams, who also is pretty solid in the slot. And then you got Honey Badger and Marcus May in free agency. And I didn't even know that the New Orleans Saints had signed Marcus May. Marcus May is really underrated. One of the more underrated safeties in the NFL. So when you look at this secondary in terms of talent and depth, I don't think no other team in the NFL has what the Saints have at the secondary position. Look at linebacker. Pete Warner was pretty good last season. DeMario Davis is still one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Then on the defensive line, you have Cam Jordan, David Onyemata, and Marcus Davenport has really started to come on. I mean, Davenport, even though he now only has 4 fingers, he had 9 sacks last season. Really, really phenomenal for New Orleans. He's now starting to come on. So for the Saints, in my opinion, I think that they're going to have the best defense in the NFL. Dennis Allen is now their head coach. He's been their defensive coordinator for the last couple of years, and the defense has been really good under him. Remember how bad this defense was before he took over? I think that this defense has so much depth and so much talent that I just think this is going to be the best unit in the league. So let me know how you guys feel about my top 10 NFL defenses going into the 2022 NFL season. I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more content. I upload NFL videos and college football videos daily. Also, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, the JT Sports Podcast is available.